there, Empowered Peeps. I'm Ryan to the rescue. And today we're going to talk about repairing these pesky little chips that happen in the corners around the house. So you may think that it's just a little chip in the paint and you can paint over it. Well, you certainly can, but if you do, you'll still see the outline of the chip because it's really the texture that got chipped off. So what I'm gonna do is show you how to first fill in the hole, then replace the texture, and then trowel it down, and then paint it. So by the time we're done, it'll look like the chip never happened. Now, different walls have different kinds of textures. This one is called knockdown, and it's very common. Another very common one is called orange peel. So today I'm going to be demonstrating knockdown for you, and orange peel is a very similar procedure, so I'll be mentioning that as well. Let me tell you what things you're going to need for this job. First, you're going to need this wall texture. It's made by Homax, and this one is called knockdown. If you need orange peel, it'll be in a can just like this. It's going to be a different color and it'll say orange peel right here. You'll also need a trowel for the knockdown. If you're doing orange peel, you do not need a trowel. Today I'm also going to demonstrate using spackling to fill in the hole because you may have a hole that's different than just a chip. For example, if you had a big screw or a wall anchor in your wall, then you might have a hole that's fairly significant and you'll need to fill it in with spackle first. You'll also need a magic eraser and a few towels and also a piece of sheetrock. You can buy a small piece of sheetrock in just a 2 by 2 foot square. That way you can practice your technique and your spray. You'll want to try your hand at various sprays and textures because it can be fine or it can be heavy. And then also try your hand at troweling afterwards. So that way you can get all of your practice done here before you move to the wall. Now this is a multi-step process with lots of dry time in between. I'm going to now switch up the angle so that you can see really good what I'm doing, and let's get started. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is clean the wall with a magic eraser. Because no matter how good of a housekeeper you are, there's a good chance that there's a buildup of dirt on the wall, especially on corners. And when we go to do the touch-up paint in the end, if we put our fresh, clean touch-up paint here onto a wall that's a little bit dirty, it's not gonna match. So it's worth it to take this extra step in the beginning to make sure the wall is good and clean. Next, I'm going to use this product to fill in the hole a little bit. Depending on how deep your hole is, you may need to use this. If it's very shallow, you may be able to skip this step. The way I'm gonna do it this time is just put a little bit on my finger, and then all I wanna do is soften up those hard edges, because when I spray the texture on, it will add the actual texture to the wall. This is just going to fill in the hole a little bit and soften up those edges. Now this is color changing spackling, so it goes on pink and then when it's dry, it turns white. So I'll be back in a little bit when it's dry. Now the spackle is done because the pink has turned white. And that took only 1 hour because this application was a very thin application. If you do something that is in a deep hole or kind of wide, then it will take up to 3 hours to turn white, and then it'll be ready for the next step. Now, I already have a towel on the floor to catch any splitters or splatters that might occur. And I also have a towel that's a little bit wet in my hand to easily wipe the wall if I need to. Now you'll want to have this shaken really good, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 minutes, and make sure that you can hear that ball moving around. And then go ahead and spray it on the sheetrock one last time before you do the wall, because it might have some glumps or clumps come out, or sometimes it even has like an oily substance that comes out. Now when you're texturing a big area, you'll do in circular motions. But this is a very small little spot that we're texturing today, so I'm going to do little bursts of the texture. All right, nozzle's clear and the thickness looks just right, so let's hit the wall. I also put a piece of cardboard right here to protect my refrigerator, which is adjacent to this little patch. If you don't like the way your spray came out and you want to give it another shot, just grab a towel, wipe it off, and try again. So in this case, less is more. So you want to stop, and you don't want to have the whole patch covered up because, as you know, the texture is uneven. So you want your spray texture to be uneven as well. So leave it a little bit less than you might think that you need. Now that we're done with this step, there's an important thing you need to do before you store it away. Turn it upside down and spray it outside until the tube comes out clear. And that way it will be less likely to have clogs in it next time. Then you can wipe off the nozzle really good and replace the cap, and then you can store it away for next time. All right, the next step is to knock down the texture with a trowel. And that's why it's called knock down, because you knock down the extra high parts. Now, this actually looks pretty good already just sprayed on. So I'm just going to knock that down just a little bit. Just ever so lightly skim the top to knock down the high places. Like I said, don't even worry about being perfect because texture is uneven and imperfect, so your texture should be uneven and imperfect as well. All right, so I'm happy with that. Now we put on the spackle and it dried, and then we put on the texture and it had its preliminary dry time, and then we knocked it down. Now we have to wait between 2 and 5 hours for it to fully set before we can paint it. All right, 2 hours have gone by, night has fallen, so I've added some extra lighting. Sorry about the shadows. Anyway, if you're gonna do all of this in one day, I recommend you get an earlier start in the day than I did. Nevertheless, we shall persist. So we have 2 small steps still left to do. And before we put on the primer, I'm going to give a little brush to the area that we've been working on. With a dry rag, I'm just going to give it a little rub. And that way that will knock off any dust particles. Also, if there are any sharp edges that the trowel left behind, I'm gonna knock those sharp edges off with this dry towel. Since this texture is kind of chalky, it's going to absorb your paint differently than your painted wall. So I recommend that you put on some primer first. So get some primer. You can just get a small bucket of primer, or if you happen to have some flat paint already at your house, especially like a light color, like flat white, usually ceiling paint is flat, so you can use ceiling paint or whatever flat paint you have. Give it a good stir. Now, before we get started with the primer, if you opted not to do the trowel for the knockdown texture, then you will need to, at this point, use some sandpaper to sand the edges down just a little bit. Don't be too aggressive with your sandpaper or with your towel, because if you are, you're going to make the whole area smooth. And then that will defeat the whole purpose of us adding texture in the first place. So now we just need a little bit of primer. We just need to cover the area that we hit with the texture. Now I'm gonna let that dry for about 1 hour, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I didn't finish up this project last night, as you can see by the lighting. My daughters ended up coming home, and I opted to spend some fun time with them. Family first, no regrets. So here we are the next day, and we finally get to finish up this project with the last step. What we need to do is put on the touch-up paint. So it's going to be your original wall color. Now, what I always do and what I recommend for you is after you paint your walls the very first time, put some of your paint into a little jar like this. I like to use a plastic peanut butter jar. I think it works out really great and it seals nice and tight. And always label your paint with the color and the sheen, that's important, and then also where in the house it goes. So if it's the kitchen or if it's the bedroom or whatever, it happens to be that all of my walls are gray, so I just put gray wall paint and then eggshell. So I have it well labeled so that I can just give it a really good shake and open it up, and then I'm ready to do my touch-up paint. It's just so much more simple that way. Now, when you're touch-up painting, you want to be sure to get the paint really well on all of the places that we put the new spackle and the new wall texture. So you want to get it on nice and thick in there and fill in all of those holes of the texture. Now, a very, very important step next is feathering the paint out. Even though we started this whole project with cleaning the wall, there's a really good chance that the new paint and the old paint won't match exactly. Either it could be from a different bucket of paint, or it could be just the fact that this is new and that is old. So now, after you have gotten the whole area covered, so all of the new texture is covered with paint, then you wipe off your paintbrush, and then it's just dry with a little bit of the paint left over in there. Then you're gonna feather the paint out. The new paint, the new wet paint over the old paint. So you just feather it out, and by doing so, it will ensure that the new paint and the old paint will blend together. So remember, I'm not putting down any more paint. I'm just using this dry brush to feather out and spread out some of that new paint over the old paint. That way it's blended together. Once it's dry, you will never see the difference. Before we wrap up for today, I wanted to give a great big shout out to my handyman friend, Steve. He teaches me stuff so that I can teach you. Thanks, Steve. All right, well, that's a wrap. All the steps are complete. I'm so excited with how that turned out. I have never actually done new wall texture on my wall before, and I'm very, very pleased with how it turned out. Now, even though you have only seen me working on this one patch on my wall, I actually had many chips on corners throughout my house. So in between videos, I have been running around and repairing all of those corners as well. So I'm very excited about this very small home maintenance and beautification task that I have accomplished. So I hope that you have found this video easy to follow and useful, and you can now run around your house and repair any gouged out corners and chips that you may have. If you liked this video, please click like and subscribe, and come follow us again because we post new how-to videos every single week. I hope to see you again. So if you have to put new texture on your wall for any reason, don't worry, we can do it.